Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us for another edition of On Point at Notre Dame. I'm Kevin Brennan with the Notre Dame Alumni Association. When two Notre Dame graduates meet for the first time out in the world, one of the first questions which inevitably comes up is, which residence hall did you live in? That's a testament to the unique and cherished system of residential life here at Notre Dame. And today, we're thrilled to be able to examine all things residential life at Notre Dame. And we're very grateful to have with us Notre Dame's Vice President for Student Affairs, Erin Hoffmann Harding. Erin, thanks so much for being here.
Kevin, thank you. It's a delight to be here to talk about a tradition and a distinctive part of the university's undergraduate education. So I'm really just delighted to share as much information as I can and answer what questions I can. To get things out of the way, I should let everyone know I'm a 1997 Notre Dame grad, but to answer the question, Kevin, you just spoke about, I lived in Siegfried Hall all 4 years when I was here on campus, which is now a men's hall. So it was a really interesting transition. I was the last class of women to graduate from Siegfried back in 1997. So without further ado, I think here we go. What I'd like to share here today is some information about the new residence halls we're going to be opening this fall. We have two new residence halls opening on the east side of campus. And I'll also give you a little bit of information as a result of those new hall openings about how we are going to improve life and the renovations of our existing halls. I am but a steward on this effort, as I think most of us are. The university itself was founded by the Congregation of Holy Cross, and residential life is, I think, among many things, such a distinctive element for us of how the university has formed community over the years. And so what you see here on the screen right now is a quote from the university's mission statement, talking about why living together with one another is so important to the undergraduate education that we provide. So you can see it's a way of living consonant with a Christian community and manifest in prayer, liturgy, and service. Residential life, which we're talking about today, endeavors to develop that sense of community and of responsibility that prepares students for subsequent leadership in building society that is at once more human and more divine. Pretty lofty goals, but one I'm very, very proud to be a part of. The picture you see here today is actually Father Paul Doyle, our rector of Dillon Hall, and this was a milkshake mass, which is a wonderful tradition we have on campus, where we were rededicating the chapel for a renovation that occurred this last summer. And this standing room only crowd is not an unusual thing that you'd find on a Thursday night in Dillon for milkshake mass, because as the name implies, there are terrific milkshakes served up by the Dillon Hall staff after mass on those Thursday nights. I alluded in our mission statement to sense of community, and so given my own background, I always like to share a little bit of data and information that says is something that we feel, something that we ultimately can back up in terms of data and information. And on this regard, I'm really proud to say I think we can. So what I'm going to share with you first is a survey that our undergraduate seniors take usually around March of their senior year at Notre Dame, and we administer this every other year, as do many, many peers across the country. And they're the best of the best. You can imagine, thinking of the U.S. News and World Report Top 20, many of those same institutions participate. Here are a couple of results about Notre Dame and how we do and what our students say about their experience at Notre Dame. So what you see in blue is Notre Dame seniors, and the 96% that you see for both satisfaction with undergraduate education and quality of instruction are those of our seniors who say they were satisfied or very satisfied with both of those elements of their undergraduate experience at Notre Dame. So we're obviously very proud of those results. And then the 89% in both cases that you see is the median of those highly selective peers that I alluded to. So Notre Dame is doing well. We're exceeding our peers in both of those dimensions, but are relatively close in terms of the result. Sense of community, though, is one of the biggest differentiators for the University of Notre Dame when we look at those highly selective academic peers. And here you see this result that our students say, when I leave Notre Dame, as I'm thinking about my senior year, my sense of community on campus, my satisfaction level there is far, far above what we see for our peers. And in residential life, we think that has a great deal to do with that sense of community that our students experience. This last year, we actually tried to dig into that information a little bit more. And so we said, what students does contribute to a sense of community on campus? And here were their results. So I can't compare to peers because this is a special question that we just administered for Notre Dame. But what you see here are the reasons that students could select. So there's a lot of great impact for Notre Dame. Some students really affiliate their sense of community with their academic experiences, being in a major and studying with a consistent group of students over the last few years. Study abroad, certainly another differentiator for a Notre Dame undergraduate education. You see the results of 3.93 said that was important to students in terms of their sense of community. But the number one result was residence hall life. And so we think not only is this something that makes Notre Dame different, but we know that residential life itself makes a true difference to our students and their ability to connect to one another. So using that, we knew that as we were building 2 new buildings on campus this fall, that we needed to think very intentionally about how these buildings could facilitate the development of community. At our residential halls, of course, they're very unique, first and foremost, because of the people that live within them. So we have exclusively senior resident assistants. We're led by rectors, which is a very unusual and pastoral role at Notre Dame. And we have a stay hall system. So like myself, I lived in Siegfried Hall for 4 years. I was sorted into that community randomly as a first-year student and then remained there. So all of those elements about the people that live in our halls make them really unusual. But we also know that the architecture and the buildings themselves can make a difference in our ability to connect students to one another. So we developed, with the help of students and hall staff, what's called a model program. So what you see in this picture is actually a depiction of one of the new residence halls that will be opening this fall on campus. And we developed this model program with the help of student focus groups. So we randomly and deliberately solicited both students on campus and students who decided to live off campus their senior year. We also conducted focus group with rectors, with RAs who are charged with building these communities, and we said what works and what could be improved about the buildings where you live and your ability to connect with one another. And the result of that is that we developed this model program that was utilized for the construction of the 2 new residence halls, but also is going to be used to inform our renovations of existing halls going forward, to the extent that the architecture allows us to do that. So I'm going to share a few pictures with you about the model program and what's included in it. First picture here that you see is the interior view of the lobby of the new women's hall. That'll be closest to Hesburgh Library, so it'll be on the south side of the 2 new residence halls and north of the library itself. And what you see here when you walk in, the entrance is a new concept that we heard from our students. This will be called a reading room. And it's a place where students, very deliberately so, has a variety of different windows so that you can see who's inside. We might use this event for hall speakers. We might use it for simply quiet study space coming in there. But the idea is to be immediately visible that you're walking into what we hope will very much present as a residential space for our students. Continuing down that same hallway, then what you see is the major first floor community lounge. And this is a critical component of our ability to build community amongst our students. So what you see in the depiction here is actually a 2-story lounge, which is an exciting new innovation for these 2 new residential communities. But it has many of the elements similar to what we've heard works best in our existing halls. So you see sort of a social gathering space there on the right-hand side. Students can watch TV. There's actually, to the back of the photo and the depiction where you can see it, more soft seating and sort of lounge space for students to congregate. To the left, you see a kitchen. Many of our students, both men and women, build community like any of us do in the kitchens of our own home around a table. And so it will have an open kitchen. Actually, the walls you see here in this picture, we were able to get an exemption within the fire code, and we'll be able to have an open concept kitchen and a dining area. So we just had Junior Parents Weekend on campus this past weekend. You can imagine the luncheons that get hosted by each of our residence hall communities will happen in this new hall community in this new lounge. And then off to the left of the kitchen that you can't see is an exit out to outdoor space. So again, when you think about welcome weekend or you think about commencement weekend, this is a place for a hall community to gather with one another. And the rector's apartment is located very nearby this space, so too that there's a source of support for all of our students in case they need to talk to their rector when they come in and come through. Next, let me talk about a few elements of the model program in the new halls that are also informing what we're trying to achieve. So student rooms is obviously of great importance to our students who live in them. What's new and what's different, and what did we learn about the existing hall that informed this new model program? One is variety of rooms matters a great deal to our students. So each section has some unique elements, unique rooms. They are all either singles, doubles, or quads. What we heard from our students and from our hall staff is that odd-numbered rooms, shockingly so, triples and quints, don't end up always facilitating the best building of community among our students for obvious reasons you can imagine. But students do appreciate character. So we have some doubles that are larger than other doubles. We have some with 2 windows, some with 1 window. And on the 4th floor of the new residence hall is actually a set of dormered windows so that there's a little bit of character for the students in a quieter area on that section. So we really tried to be intentional in terms of how we designed the rooms and had how many quads per section. The men's hall will actually also have the option of either quads or what we would call some 6-man rooms. And that's because we heard from our men that that's a way they like to build community, is to have larger groups of people living together. So we really tried to be responsive in hearing from the student focus groups on that dimension. A couple of other unique things you may not know that Notre Dame student rooms have compared to others is we actually go down to the state of Indiana for every new residence hall and ask for an exemption so that doors don't automatically shut. Open doors within our communities is really important for students to interact and get to know one another. If a student wants to have a closed door, they might be studying in their room. Certainly they can, but the default is that the door actually remains open. And again, that's an intentional decision that we've made. Another intentional decision is we've actually made the hallways very wide in this new these new residential communities. We heard in our focus groups that halls like Walsh Hall and Carroll Hall, which have very high ceilings and wide hallways, that students congregate there themselves, and we wanted to replicate that if we could. And the hallways are also straight, as it is in both of those historic buildings, so that students can see one another when they're coming in and out of their rooms. So more than you'd think, I think, than simply the hall furniture fitting into the student rooms in terms of how we've designed them. Another really important element, as I've alluded to, is the people who lead our communities. And at Notre Dame, you see here a picture of Father Bob Blockery, who's rector of Soren Hall. And we have priests, sisters, and lay ministers serving as rectors here on campus today. Regardless of their training and their vocational background, they all serve this role as pastor of a community. And so we wanted to think thoughtfully about where the rector's room is in the new halls and as we renovate existing halls, so that there's a natural passing by, a conversation point to be able to see these hall leaders. Our hall staff are located in a similar location in each and every section, moving up. And again, that's so if you need an RA, God forbid in times of crisis, or simply want to seek one out, that it's a very natural point to be able to find your RA there. In residence units is a point of pride, too, for the university. We have many, many Holy Cross religious living in our halls, and in fact are full to the brim, which I'm really grateful to say that we have plenty of priests, and even more than we're able to accommodate, willing to live in residence with our students. And I know for myself, Father Greg Green lived in Siegfried when I was a student. He still today lives in Welsh Family Hall, and was a great pastoral source of guidance and spiritual advice for me when I was living in Siegfried. We want to make sure that all of our halls and all of our students have that same opportunity. We also, several years ago, added a faculty in residence program. Ed and Shirley Hums live in residence in Lyons Hall, in what some of you on the call may know as the Annex, a little separate area off of Lyons. And these two new halls will have an opportunity for either faculty or priests in residence to live with our students. So we have 3 apartments throughout the 2 new buildings. So the men's hall happens to have 2 in residence apartments, and the women's hall has 1 in residence apartment. So we think that too is an important modeling and resource for our students within our halls. Common space. You saw the pictures of what I think are the exceptional new common space within the halls for that new 2-story lounge. But each floor, what we learned from our student focus groups, also includes a common element for students to get together. We have dedicated study rooms, but what we heard from our students is that they normally seek out a place to study if they need one. And so that is a place of destination. What we wanted to create was what we call pass-through lounges, where students would encounter one another by chance, again, to try to build these relationships with one another. The picture you see here is a renovation we did a couple of years ago of St. Edward's Hall, right next to the main building. And this is their main common space. But within the model program and the new halls, what we're trying to achieve is actually a lounge for our students on every single floor, and to the extent that that's possible, at a natural place of circulation, so that students will run into one another. In the new halls, these lounges are located right above the staircase and far from the elevators, which are certainly present in the hall for convenience and accessibility reasons, but not on the main path of students walking with one another, because we hope they will use and walk through these common spaces and get to know one another that way. The men's hall, actually, in terms of common space, and the women's hall also differ slightly. So as much as I said the kitchen is the center of a great deal of community building, what we heard from men is we really need one full kitchen, and we'd also like to have food sales, which within our men's community is usually something open late night where you can get pizza or some snacks. That's a student-run business. That's not as common or as frequent in our women's hall, and so in lieu of that, but what the women said is for stress relief, often we like to bake. So every single floor will have a full kitchen in the women's hall. The men's hall will have the 2 full kitchens, food sales, and the main first floor, and then also we'll have a kitchenette. They really said they just needed a microwave and a sink as they were thinking about each of the other floors. So those are some of the ways that the common spaces will differ. And then of course each hall, rightly so, and has a beautiful chapel space, and the chapels differ, but we again heard great feedback from our students about the spaces where they come to pray and how we can make that inviting and inclusive for all to worship together. So that's a bit about the 3 elements of the model program. In closing, I know there have been some questions already submitted to us, and I'll just cover very briefly what these new halls are making possible for us in terms of investment of our existing halls. So here you see a picture of Walsh Hall on the left-hand side and Knott Hall, which, Kevin, I believe was your home when you were here on campus. But what you see at the bottom is a new label and new terminology. Over the past few years, and really for a very long time at the university, there's been a great deal of investment in our existing communities. First, and rightly so, in terms of life safety concerns, the exterior of the building, thinking about issues of accessibility and the masonry and the roof. All of these are really important things to our students, and if they're not working, can cause tremendous problems for us. But we really have made great progress and gotten through most of those exterior issues for our next cycle, for the next couple of decades. And so what we're able now to do as a result of the new hall openings is have a consideration for doing 2 hall renovations in 1 year, which is new. The last few years we've been doing 1, so we're doubling the cycle, which I'm very excited about. And we're also able to do more extensive renovations of our historic halls. So that's where you see Walsh Hall on the left-hand side is going to go through our first academic year renovation, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But essentially, Walsh is going to do everything from thinking about accessibility in an elevator to mason repair and roof repair. It still is one of the last ones left on that cycle. But we're also going to take care of what I think are really important creature comforts to our students, like replacing the pipes that come to each of their individual residence hall rooms. And that's the first time Walsh will have had those pipes touched in that way since it's been opened. And because of the extensive level of touching every single student room in that way, we weren't able to do the renovation in a summer. And so I'll come back to that a bit more. But so Walsh will be closed during this 2016-17 year for that major year renovation. And we will follow in subsequent years with other major academic year renovations of historic halls. On the right-hand side, though, is minor summer renovation. So this will look and feel more like what we've been accustomed to in the last few years, and not as the first on that list. That may include some common space changes to try to adapt to the new model program that we've developed. It will include probably some very important furniture reinvestment, even though not as in many of our terms, certainly mine included, a mod quad or a newish hall. We actually haven't had a full furniture replacement since it opened in the late 80s. And when you think about the hard and the good, well-worn student use of that, it's probably and is time, I can assure you, for us to be thinking about those elements for our students. In both of these renovations, we will be doing our best to adapt within the historic uniqueness of each hall, but elements of this model program and what we heard works in terms of building a community with our students. So last month, in January, we made this announcement to the student body of how we were going to be filling the two new residence halls. And so you see again a picture of Walsh on the right-hand side and Pangborn on the left-hand side. So what happened and what was the rationale from a university standpoint for the announcement that was made? Pangborn Hall will be moving as a total community and an intact community into the new Women's Hall. And Pangborn's building will be used as what we're now calling swing space for the Walsh community to move into it for a year as they're renovated during the academic year. Why was Pangborn selected is a very common and often question. A couple of really important reasons. The first one being that there has long been overcrowding within our residence halls, which is why we're building the two new halls in the first place. But that overcrowding is more prevalent for men right now than it is for women. And Pangborn is a relatively small community, so we were able to move Pangborn into the new Women's Hall, and with the incremental number of beds or new rooms we're going to be adding to the Women's Hall, we'll be able to alleviate the rest of the overcrowding for women without having an impact on overcrowding going forward next year. Pangborn is also not a terrific candidate for the extensive renovations that we've been discussing. It has some constraints, which I wouldn't be the expert to comment on, but I can share with you that include not only accessibility in terms of access to the building and throughout, but also its electrical and its HVAC systems in terms of its ceiling height. So our ability to modernize those mechanical systems, given the ceiling height in Pangborn, is a real limitation. And so it, while is, and this has become infamous among our students, certainly safe and functional for someone to live in it for the foreseeable future, it's not a great candidate for multi-million-dollar investment by the university. So we think that this facility is now going to serve a wonderful purpose for our campus as this swing hall for the next few years. So the Walsh women will be moving in there next year. I can say to this group, and I'm certainly happy to answer any questions about this, this was big news in the student world when this announcement came out last month, and we took it very seriously in terms of intentionally trying to be thoughtful about a few things. One is we prioritized people first. I mentioned at the beginning that I lived in Siegfried. All of the women of Siegfried, when I graduated, moved over together to Welsh Family Hall after I graduated. They went as a community, and that was a pretty smooth movement at the time, I believe very importantly as a result of that. I was also a student at Notre Dame when Kavanaugh Hall converted from a female hall, or excuse me, from a male hall to a female hall. And that, in contrast, was a quite painful move for our community. Again, I believe reason being because groups of friends who had lived together and formed one community together had to be split up across campus. So the most important criteria for us as we were thinking about how to utilize the two new halls was to try to keep groups of students who cared for one another and had built life together as one group. And so that's the major driver behind the decision that we made it. Which halls will be renovated when was given input both by student survey results we get frequently, but also the physical needs of the building, which is why Walsh is first on the list for this new experiment. So with that, those were at least the prepared comments I had. I'm very excited and happy to answer any questions that we have about these new halls or our upcoming renovations. And Kevin, I'll turn it back to you.
Well, thanks so much, Erin. It's fascinating to hear about these future plans for our residence halls. For those of you watching live, here's how this is the portion of today's event where we're going to be taking your questions. You can start submitting them now in the question box you find just beneath the streaming player. Submit as many questions as you like. Do so throughout the remainder of today's event, and we'll try to get to as many of them as we can. Erin, you kind of outlined some exciting plans for the 2 new dorms, which will be opening this fall here on campus for those unlucky members of our viewership who do not get to brave the South Bend winters and observe the construction as it's going here on campus. Where are those 2 new dorms located geographically on campus? And how has the construction's been going? How's the progress been?
Yeah, so Kevin, in terms of location, I alluded to this earlier. They are near Mod Quad, so they are just to the east of the existing Mod Quad and to the north of Hesburgh Library. And so the Women's Hall is the southernmost of the 2 new residence halls, and so it'll be immediately adjacent to your old home of Knott Hall. And the new Men's Hall will be next to Pasquarella East. They will be the westernmost edge of a new quad that's opening at the university, which I think internally we're calling a research quad, but I suspect the students themselves will come up with a more creative name as the halls open themselves. But hopefully that gives kind of a visual picture of where they are.
And in terms of size, how do the 2 new dorms compare to kind of our current existing dorms?
Oh, great question. We did actually a little bit of analysis on this point, and so we took sense of community, which I've mentioned is something we're really trying to achieve in our halls. We had results by hall, and we did a regression analysis for the statistical geeks among us, myself included, to try to figure out what, if anything, mattered in terms of size of hall, in terms of building community. And we learned that it does make a difference. So in our largest halls, we don't tend to have as high a sense of community results. And in some of our smallest and most intimate halls, we have great community, but the halls have difficulty fielding inter-hall teams and don't have as many choices in terms of staffing. And so what we think is the ideal size is somewhere between 200 and 250 students per hall. And these new halls will fit right in the sweet spot of that. So the new men's hall will have 221 residents, and the new women's hall will have 225 residents.
I think we've got some questions coming in already from the audience, and we're ready to take our first one. This comes from Maureen. How are you encouraging seniors to remain on campus for their last year?
Yeah, so Maureen, this is actually a live and active conversation, not only within student affairs, but the student body right now, and as well the senior leaders at the university. The candid fact is that seniors are choosing still at higher numbers to live off campus. And so this last year, 64% of seniors chose to live off campus. And I can say completely candidly, as a university, we haven't done much to date to combat that trend other than the hiring of resident assistants. Why haven't we been thinking more deliberately about this? It's because we've been overcrowded to a significant degree within the current residence halls. And so in a very counterintuitive way, we've actually needed seniors to move off campus so that we can house all incoming first-year students, which is a very counterintuitive and bizarre position for us to have been in as a university. So the trend is very worrisome to me, and something we'd like to proactively address going forward. Now that we will finally have enough space for all of our students on campus, we can start to attract them back. So we're actually open to ideas on this point. We've gotten some great suggestions from students. Anything from give us different types of rooms as seniors. So you hear some responsiveness to that in the new hall, where we have larger, more attractive rooms that seniors could choose with their picks, to let's think about the board plan and how many meals I need to buy on campus when I'm a senior. What about different roles other than simply RAs that we could ask seniors to play that might carry some remuneration with them for seniors? So any and all of the above, I would say, is a live conversation right now, because this is the point where we want to stop the trend, if we can, of additional seniors choosing to move off campus and really begin to attract them back. Should they want to live off campus, that's an option that the university has, but our system and our communities work best when our undergraduates have role models from the different classes from whom to learn from, and seniors are an incredibly important piece of that part of the process for us.
We have another question coming in. I think this one is from John. John asks, what is the greatest challenge to the Notre Dame residential community during the early 21st century, and how has it changed from 40 years ago?
Ooh, 40 years ago, I probably couldn't weigh in on directly, but I'll tell you what I perceived coming into this role 4 years ago was actually the people who lead our halls and how unusual that role is. Everything about Notre Dame's system, when I talk to my colleagues in the ACC, who I have a chance to visit with every year, is different than what you would see at another institution. Rectors, thinking of them as people with life experience, who think of themselves first and foremost as ministers and pastors of a hall, is a foreign concept, even at our Catholic university peers. Most of them would have what they would call a hall director, who typically is trained in higher education and student affairs, and then a resident minister. We really, in a very deep and intentional way, combine those two roles. So recruiting rectors and thinking about ensuring that we have the right leaders in our hall was the single biggest challenge I identified in terms of residence life when I came in. And that was by listening to the people within my division and to our students, that if that element of the leadership of a hall doesn't work, Notre Dame's model doesn't work at some level, because we're simply a set of people collected in a building rather than what we're hoping to do, which is build a Christian community.
Well, to that point, and the importance of rectors to the sense of community in our residence halls, what qualities do you and your staff look for in rectors that help them kind of facilitate the right sense of community in our residence halls?
Yeah, so an extensive cultivation and interview process, but I would say ultimately we're looking for people that Sister Jean Lenz, one of our legendary figures at Notre Dame, says so much more eloquently than I, who are energized and motivated and really called in a vocational sense to share life with our students. So our rectors come from all different backgrounds and walks of life. So we have some who are trained in student affairs, others, many who have a Master of Divinity, and then priests and religious sisters who join these communities. But that, I think, ultimately is the common element we're looking through through that interview process, which is a love for students and the developmental growth and formation that they will go through as undergraduates, and a willingness to walk with them on that journey. And so we put them through the ringer. Rector candidates show up at Notre Dame after a lot of extensive discussion and a pre-interview process, meet with our students, are invited to go to a hall mass. Depending on the day, they always go somewhere on campus because we have so many daily masses there. And to get to know our students first, we do that very, very intentionally, and then have and share a meal with our interview crew. And then that day, they go through seeing all of the constituent bodies that they would work with throughout their time at the university. And I personally interview each and every one. And the first question I ask them is, we're hiring a pastor for a community. What does that mean to you in terms of what you would bring to this role here at Notre Dame? So it isn't a particular background, it's a particular orientation and a calling, and truly, I believe, a vocation and a ministry for them to think about taking on this role.
Reminder for those of you who are watching live, Erin is taking your questions now. You can submit them using the question form just beneath the streaming player where you're watching us. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. And on that note, I think we've got another question here coming in from the audience. This is from Elizabeth. What is the chance of an incoming first-year student getting in one of the new dorms?
So the short answer is I don't know an exact statistic yet. We're in the middle right now this week of what we call the inter-hall transfer process. And so students always, and relatively few take advantage of this, have an opportunity to apply at this time of the year to transfer to another hall. And this year, because of the opening of the 2 new halls for both the men's hall particularly and also the women's hall, they can opt and say, I'd like to be considered to live in the new hall. So that is a flurry, and we have a bunch of tweets out to students to remind them if they'd like to be part of forming those new communities to apply over this next week or so. Once we know how many upper class students are interested in living in the new halls, we will then make selections out of that group that'll give us the exact proportion and numbers for the new halls. Roughly defined, what I can say is that we're going to try to have a comparable incoming community of first-year students that we would based on the size of the hall to any of our other halls. But we don't know yet, so a great deal of this right now is in the hands of our students here. But I can say we did a couple of town hall forums with the students. We had a lot of great excitement, particularly for the students when they saw pictures of the new halls and learned the names of the new rectors. Sister Mary Donnelly, the current rector of Pangborn Hall, will be moving with her community over to the new women's hall. And Father Matt Kozora, currently rector of Carroll Hall, is going to be the new leader of the men's hall community.
Great. So both new halls are in great hands. You mentioned, obviously discussed during your presentation, that the current community in Pangborn is moving into the new women's residence hall. How has that news been received by the current residents of Pangborn? Are they excited to move into kind of the new hall with bigger rooms and kind of an optimized plan?
Yeah, I think, Kevin, it has been the range of emotions that you would expect, and ultimately I find really reaffirming. So the night that we communicated this news to Pangborn and all of campus, because we actually had multiple halls affected, so we needed to share the information with them. We also held in-hall meetings for the 4 hall communities that were going to be impacted by this news. So Pangborn, Walsh, Knott, and Carroll, because in one way, shape, or form, they were all touched by the news that day. In Pangborn, there was surprise and I think some great deal of excitement about the new facility, great reassurance from the women that they would be moving together, but some mourning as well. Many of us may look at Pangborn, its facility itself, and say perhaps it's not our best architectural example on campus. It doesn't boast any of those creature comforts like air conditioning, but it's deeply loved by those women. And so there was a mourning, and is a mourning process for what of who we are today, because we live in this building, will be sustained as we move into this new community, and what new can we imagine. So it's a time of change for the students, and we certainly anticipated that. And Sister Mary is wonderful, along with her hall staff, of continuing to talk with the women about exactly some of those questions. What will the mascot or the new name of the hall be, and how will that influence what we now know as the Pangborn community or any of the events that they have? They're involved in those conversations right now. They will also be welcoming in 60 new women to their community, because Pangborn is smaller than the existing, or than the new women's residence hall. And so they'll have new community members to add to this conversation as they come together in the fall. So like anything in life, it's a time of transition. I hope and ultimately believe that what we've tried to do is care for them as a community and together, and that will ease this transition. But it's been a time of change.
For those of you who may have recently joined us during the program, Erin is now taking your questions about our residential life system here at Notre Dame. You can submit them using the form just under the streaming player, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. And we've got another question ready here. This comes in from Shannon. How does an incoming student choose a residence hall?
Shannon, the short answer is you can't, with a very, very minor exception. There is, for any Harry Potter readers out there, and I count myself among them, the equivalent at Notre Dame of what I would call the sorting hat, which is a computer program in late June that we announce in early July that randomly assigns incoming first-year students to residence halls. And the only real exception to that is if a rector or a family might have lived in a particular community. My husband was a resident of ZOM and then talked with his rector. They get a very small preference of hall communities there that they're able to exercise, but extremely small. Other than that, the assignment process is a random one. And so we have an announcement day that's usually around July 4th when the students can log on. And we have students log into that system within 30 seconds of it opening to find out what hall they've been assigned to. And of course, now in a world of Facebook and Instagram and Yik Yak and everything else from a social media app under the planet, you start to see these communities forming with our students even before they arrive on campus.
That's great. We have another question coming in here from our audience. It's from Paul. Would Notre Dame ever consider investing in near off-campus student housing communities?
We have, is the answer in terms of investment, but distinctly for our post-baccalaureate population rather than our undergraduate population so far. So a new complex called the Overlook at Notre Dame opened, I think this is its second year of operation, and that is really creative and ultimately I think very beneficial partnership we've pursued at the university. We only house today 17% of our post-bac population, our graduate students in our law and our MBA students. And we soon, because of the closing of the University Village and O'Hara Grace townhomes, will only house about 12 to 13% of that post-bac population. But we nonetheless, as a university, really want to have safe and affordable housing options for our students off campus. And so that to date has been where we've pursued these off-campus and private partnerships. And so the Overlook is a community that is open to graduate and professional students, as well as on the margin some faculty and staff who might be interested in living in that community. We partnered with a local developer to build that facility. We had input into the design of the apartments and the rooms that were going to be offered to our graduate students, and it's been tremendously successful, so much so that we're opening the second part of that complex this coming August.
We talked about that Pangborn would now be serving as kind of a swing residence hall for the residence halls that need refurbishing that will take longer than just a summer. And I know we mentioned Walsh, and I think maybe Morrissey and Baden as the others that are scheduled to move into Pangborn for a year at a time. Roughly how many of our current residence halls are going to at some point be in need of those really large-scale refurbishments? Yeah.
Kevin, we don't know for sure yet, but we think at least for the next decade that we'll be talking about academic year renovations of this sort. My guess is it probably elongates past that to more like 15 years when you think about the construction cycle of some of the historic halls. The only three we've definitively decided on so far are the three that you mentioned, which are Walsh this next academic year, followed by Baden, and then after that, Morrissey. Walsh and Baden are the two halls still left in our last renovation cycle that still need pretty significant exterior work as well as interior work. And then Morrissey is the first one of the new cycle looking forward. But beyond that, we typically, even announcing 3 years out is relatively unusual, and that's because conditions can change. Sometimes these buildings have a challenge that's unknown to us as we continue to have facilities assessments, and so we'll continue to go through and make an assessment of which ones should be next on the list. One thing we've not mentioned, but I think is worthy of note, is that we get student input on these renovations. So Walsh, that will be undergoing renovation next academic year, we are talking with the women of Walsh over the course of this spring semester to say, what do you love about Walsh itself? What would you like to see changed? And what can we retain that will make the elements of your community that you love so dearly still present in the new renovation?
When renovating these kind of historic dorms, residence halls, I'm sure that one of the aspects that many of the residents and former residents of these halls love is kind of the history and character that they have that have been part of Notre Dame for so long. Is it a challenge to kind of balance renovations and modernizations with preserving kind of that history and character that so many of these older residence halls have?
I would say it's a challenge, but a tremendous opportunity. So that's what I actually really love about this concept of the model program, is what we want to do, hopefully by the end of this cycle, is ensure that there are comparable types of spaces. So we think that students should have an opportunity to build community in lounges. We think this addition of kitchens on every floor for a women's hall is probably a common amenity that we would really want to deliver, if at all possible, across all of our halls. But where that kitchen is or where that lounge is located would rightly so differ by the architecture of those particular buildings. If there's a hall that dearly and deeply finds that triples really work within their culture, we would be open to that conversation with students as we're thinking about the renovation, because we want to understand the ethos of that particular community. But I think what we're attempting as a large part to do is use the building constraints in a way that allows us still to have unique elements of the model program that are present in each of those renovations. I think it's a fun challenge every year.
One of the really interesting things you touched on during your initial presentation, which I think many members of our audience might not be that familiar with, is the faculty in residence program going on right now in Lyons Hall. With those faculty members living among the residents in the residence hall, what is kind of their role in the residence hall, and how does it differ from that of the hall staff, the rector and resident assistants? Yeah,
it's deliberately distinct from the hall staff, but collaboratively so. Ed Hums, I can't say enough nice things about he and Shirley, and they should speak for themselves, and I think have through a couple of articles that have been published. But I view their role as enriching a community in many ways, and so they have participated in and are knowledgeable about resources that are available on campus, but have a small stipend to do their own type of programming. So in their first year in residence in Lyons, their cat was actually a very important magnet of students to come and see them and talk with them in their apartment, because students miss their pets from home. And so the cat actually had business cards in Lyons and would leave cookies in the common lounge in Lyons to say, hey, stop by and come see us. And Ed has brought faculty colleagues over to give pre-test day sort of stress reliever sessions, or how to be successful in the classroom at Notre Dame, and really thinking through different academic elements. And I think Ed would tell you himself he's learned more about our students, and it's improved his own teaching in the classroom to understand the many demands that our students face there. So it has been nothing but a tremendous success, but it is entirely on top of and in addition to what we would ask hall staff to do. In many ways similar to our Precinct residents, just with a different focus, who are pastorally present and spiritually present to our students, and also certainly help us with our liturgical needs in the halls, but are an additional source of role modeling and support to our students within the halls.
That's really interesting. We've learned so much today about many different aspects of our kind of great residential life system here at Notre Dame, and how it continues to evolve. Where can folks who watch today's program, who want more information on the residence halls and residential life at Notre Dame, where can they go to find out more?
Sure. Student Affairs, our website, actually has not only what I've discussed today in terms of the letter that was released to our students, but information about the role of Rector, about each of our hall communities, and any frequently asked questions that maybe I haven't covered today at studentaffairs.nd.edu, and hopefully can be a tremendous resource there. I'd also encourage certainly our halls themselves, and you can see the background of our rectors and on that same website as well.
Well, Erin, it's such a great topic, as you kind of laid out in your presentation. Residence halls play such a huge role in the student experience here at Notre Dame. You mentioned I live in Knott Hall. My kind of best friends in the world are all still the guys I met in 3B of Knott Hall my freshman year. So it's such a valuable part of the university, and I know so many members of the Notre Dame family, not just current students, but alums and parents and friends are proud of and invested in our residence hall system. So thank you for your stewardship, and thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, Kevin, thank you. And I think you said it exactly correctly, which is we're just stewards of this wonderful and distinctive piece of Notre Dame. And I hope, if nothing else, everyone is certainly comforted by the fact that we understand that this is something immensely special about Notre Dame and want to do everything we can to preserve and enhance it going forward.
Thanks also to all of you who joined us live today and submitted your questions. And thanks to all of you who've watched later on My Notre Dame or on YouTube. Remember, for all of our previous episodes of On Point at Notre Dame and for all of our online learning content, you can visit the Alumni Association at my.nd.edu/learn. I'm Kevin Brennan with the Notre Dame Alumni Association. Thanks so much for watching, and go Irish.